Announcer.
Can I kick us off? There you go. I'm just basically going to do the honors, then you get to do them again for yourself, Len. Thank you all. John Marley here. It's 2 o'clock. Let's get the show on the road. We have Len Noe here with us. Len's been with Cyborg for a long time. Thought a lot of pithy thoughts, big thoughts about Cyborg and Pam and how we secure the enterprise. He's a technical evangelist, white hat hacker. He knows a thing or two about hacking both systems as well as bio, which is pretty cool. He has several pods out there that if you ever want to tune in and really hear some of the fun stuff here beyond the talk today, obviously, I highly encourage you. I'll get over to you, Len. Take it away.
Appreciate it. So, that's my, that was my presentation. And if you think I use Windows, I got a bridge to sell you. So, first of all, thank you all very much for actually being here. Appreciate everybody's participation. And you have shown up for the 2024 A Cyborg Odyssey. So if you're actually one of those people who don't know anything about me, you're going to learn a lot over the course of the next 45 minutes. So let's start off with just some simple introductions. My name is Len Noe. As was just stated, I am a technical evangelist for CyberArk. I am also a transhuman, an author, and probably the biggest freak here. So, as the title stated, 2024, A Cyborg Odyssey. So today we're going to be talking about transhumans and biohackers. So if we take a look at the concept of evolution, you know, and I'm not trying to get into anybody's personal idealisms in terms of the creation story and whatnot, but essentially, this is actually the path that, in my opinion, humanity is actually on. And the point is, we're actually already at the point of technical integration, and most people are just completely unaware that it even exists. So when we talk about the concept of just being a transhuman, what does that mean? So I can tell you right now, it has nothing to do with my sexual orientation or my gender. That's the first thing I want to wipe off the slate right now. Has nothing to do with that. Transhumanism is a philosophy that allows for the integration of technology with humanity. The term was originally coined by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Julian Huxley back in 1956. And his philosophy was, any deficiencies within the human body, we should use technology in order to basically address those. Anybody here possibly type 2 diabetic? You know, you don't have to raise your hand. Most people here should be very familiar with things like continuous glucose meters. Everybody here has seen somebody that has a hearing aid. Maybe you know somebody that has a stem pain system that's dealing with nerve pain. Maybe you know somebody with a pacemaker. Every person on that list, along with any medical type of augmentation, falls under the philosophy of Dr. Huxley's. You know, there's an issue with the human body. Let's use the technology to bring them back up to where they're on status quo with every other human out there. The other gentleman that you see up there is a gentleman by the name of FM 2030. And yes, that is his legal name. He changed his name to that. And if you want to know the truth, I'm really grateful that he did, because I can't pronounce this guy's actual name. But what was that? Oh yeah, he turned himself into a radio station. Unfortunately not. Actually, 2030 was the 2030 does have significance, believe it or not. You may not know FM, but I guarantee you know his work. FM 2030 was actually one of the founding scientists behind the concepts of cryogenics. And currently, FM is actually frozen somewhere in California, and the 2030 represented the year that he figured he would actually be thawed out and brought back to animation and returned to the living. So the major difference in his philosophy around transhumanism was the fact that, according to FM, anything that can be integrated into the human experience that will enhance the human condition should be fair game. So it basically boiled down to the ideas of, are we dealing with medical Or are we dealing with cyberpunk? So this introduces a subclass of individuals known as grinders. I am what is known as a grinder. Grinders are any individuals who are doing self-surgery, adding technical enhancements to their bodies outside of the realms of medical. And I am just one of a very long, long list of individuals to do this. This, what you see right here, is known as the Circadia. This was the very first non-medical device that was ever actually surgically implanted into an individual. It was about the size of a deck of cards. Now, y'all want to, everybody that knows me know that one of the first questions I get asked, and I'm actually going to take care of one of the frequently asked questions right now, is, Len, how do you get through airports? I basically walk left foot, right foot. So a little story about this particular implant right here. This gentleman was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, flew to Munich, Germany, had that procedure done, had that put into his arm in Germany, then turned around, got back on an airplane, and came back to the United States. Everybody wonders how I get through with implants that you can barely see through my skin. That's pretty glaringly obvious. You know, this particular device actually was the original Fitbit. This took care of all of his bio readings, blood oxygen, and then it was transmitting from the device to a cell phone. It was supposed to be in for a total of 6 months. It was taken out after just a couple of weeks due to anxiety as a result of the weight of this thing. You know, we have now what looks like some kind of a weird Nintendo glove. What that's actually doing, those are providing the ability for human sonar. In the pinky of that glove, he has a magnet actually implanted in his finger just like I do. And if you don't know anything about this type of implant, it adds an additional sense to the human being. I can actually feel electromagnetic fields and currents. So what he's doing is there's actually a ring of capacitors around where that magnet is, and that's those devices on the top of the glove are actually sending out sonar pulses that will give biofeedback to the magnet in his finger so he can actually be blindfolded, wear that glove, and navigate rooms. This is called the North Star V1. This was the actual first consumer-grade implantable technology that was ever developed. It was designed by a group called Grindhouse Wetware, and it was the first consumer purchasable implant. Now, for somebody like me, who spent most of my life as a black hat and trying to remain undetected, the idea of having, you know, some kind of a blinky thing in my hand that makes me look like Iron Man really doesn't do much for keeping the obfuscation going. So for me, I remember when this came out, and I remember thinking, this is really cool, but it doesn't do anything for me aside from saying, look at me. So I was aware of it, but it was never one of those implants that I thought I should get. This is a gentleman by the name of Rich Lee. He was one of the original grinders, and this guy did more for the augmented community than probably anyone. What you see right here is he has taken magnets and actually implanted them in the targuses of his ears. And what looks like a necklace that he's wearing there is actually a coil, and he actually has internal headphones that are inside of his ears. Now, this would work for listening to music, but from an offensive security perspective, this would also allow for the ability of a side channel communication that nobody else can hear. This was another self-experiment by grinders. There is a solution called Chlorin 9 that actually will give human beings the ability to see in almost complete darkness for up to 15 to 20 minutes. The black eyes actually went away after about 10 minutes. They put this gentleman in a completely dark room with 2 other individuals who hadn't had the procedure, and he was able to pick out different shapes and patterns in a completely dark room where nobody else could. So the question then begs, what does all of this have in common? The human body is meant to be moved beyond its default state. And I think one of the reasons that we're really starting to get a lot of information and we're starting to hear a lot more conversations about this is the advent of brain-computer interfaces. And at this point, I'd like to thank you, Elon Musk, for continuing to push this narrative into the media and into the spotlight. You know? So everybody here, I'm sure, is familiar with Neuralink, especially living in Texas, and the fact that, you know, just up the road here, about 2 hours, you got pretty much the X, whether that's Tesla, Starlink. Elon's basically taken over the town right next to where I live. But people also seem to think that Neuralink is the first brain-computer interface. Anyone here think that this was the first time we've put a computer into the brain of a human being? No? Good. We've been doing this since the 90s. There was a company called BrainGate. And honestly, I throw this out there just for anyone's, you know, if you're curious. There's an amazing book called Cyborg by Dr. Kevin Warwick that explains the basic starting of the integration of this type of technology into the human. One thing I also want to say is Neuralink is not the only game in town. What you see on the left there is a Neuralink. What you see on the right is another brain-computer interface by another company called Synchron. The differences between the two are extensive. Neuralink, BrainGate, all of the original brain-computer models all required open skull brain surgery. Very complicated, high level of skill required in order to be able to actually perform. Synchron is using a stent methodology. So rather than going in from the outside of the skull, they're going up through an artery into a capillary and expanding on the inside of that capillary. This means that the skill set required to be able to perform these surgeries is much lower, and the ability to contract diseases is lessened because of the lack of opening the skull. But this is the world that we are living in. The integration of the biological and the technological is already here. It's just come without a lot of the fanfare that we expected to see. We also are seeing a lot in smart technologies and prosthetics. We are now at a point in history where, as human beings, prosthetic limbs now have the ability to provide tactile feedback. They can also detect heat and cold. They've done this by actually aligning sensors to where the nerve clusters are severed in the stumps. So we are not that far off from where a replacement human part will actually become superior to the biological original. We see them in limbs, arms, hands, feet. What does the human animal look like when we're at a point where replacements are superior? You know, one question that I like to throw here just to get people thinking is if I was, let's say I worked in a factory. I'm picking up hot metal objects. If I today, in 2024, walked into my doctor's and said, I would like you to cut my arm off, provide me with a prosthetic, maybe that has 500 pounds of grip strength, maybe something that would not be affected by elements. If I walked in and said this was going to improve my life, make me better at my job, I'm going to be looked at as having body dysmorphia. There's nothing wrong with your arm. Why do you want to get rid of it? But what happens when we can actually use this new technology to improve? The Hippocratic Oath states do no harm, but is it actually harm if I'm actually improving my life? So if you don't know about me, I actually started this journey about 5 years ago. And I started getting implants. And about 4 years ago, I brought out the very first talk on this topic. It was called Biohackers, the Invisible Threat. And I displayed 3 attacks. And if you haven't seen those, I'm going to go through them very quickly right now just to recap. So the first is called Handshake. This is a physical access attack. I have currently 10 different microchips in my body, ranging from NFC to RFID to a credit card to magnets. I even have cryptobionic chips that are FIPS certified that I actually use to enhance my security online. But for this one, we're going to use a physical access chip. It's in the top of my left hand, and I can actually imitate about 126 different access protocols with this one chip. Prox, Diamond, Pyramid, Indala, you name it. So I'm going to do this in real time. For this, I would actually need to first get a hold of a card. Yes, that's my old badge, and yes, I look like every hacker clip art you've ever seen. I'm going to get a new unique ID in my Proxmark, and we're going to name this one Lens ID. So this type of process shouldn't be new to anybody. We've been cloning cards for over 10 years. But it's how I'm going to use that. Next, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scan the implant in my hand just so I can get a baseline, and we're going to do some comparisons just to show everybody the differences. So we get a new unique ID. We're going to name this one implant. Takes just a second. You notice you'll see that we do have data. And at this point, I pretty much own you. We talk about bad actors and how they monetize different exfiltrated data. This is one of the key places to actually monetize stolen files. There is a complete market on the dark net just for physical access keys that have been breached. So in my example here, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to upload this to the internet. If I'm part of a larger collective, I can share this with the rest of my collective, or I can actually monetize it at this point. But for the purposes of this demonstration, there's nothing here that hasn't been done before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull both of those dumps into another program, and we're going to do a diff on them, and you'll see that the only thing that's different is sector 0, line A. So at this point, it's just as simple as saying, I want to write all the sectors of this tag to this chip. And I can actually use my cell phone to do it. So we write the information down onto the implant. Then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll scan it again, and you'll see that we actually have an identical copy. So let's extrapolate on this while the video finishes. This is a physical access attack. So if I walked into your corporation, your business, your corporate headquarters, wherever, and I have the ability to get that ID, I can actually just show up in one of your data centers. I can use that information, social engineer it to where it looks like my hand is just coming up and the door opens. From there, you're going to catch me, you're going to throw me in a room, the police are going to come, they're going to search me, they're not going to find a tool, they're not going to find a cloned card, they're not going to find a Proxmark, they're going to trespass me, and that's as far as you're going to be able to go. The problem is, I have 9 other implants and you don't know what else I've already done. So we've proven that use case. Leprosy. This is one of my favorite attacks. This was the first implant attack I ever did. So I'm very transparent. The top part of the screen is ngrok, which is an obfuscation tool. The bottom, we're just going to start off a Metasploit listener. So pretend that you don't know me, and I was making a scene somewhere. So we're going to do this in real time, and I'm going to show you how fast this works. If I can convince you to put your phone in my hand. Can somebody please help me? I just got a call from my daughter, and something happened to one of my grandkids, and my phone ran out of battery. You know, I don't know what hospital they're taking her to. Keep watching. What's my daughter's phone number? 734. Oh, God. Who remembers phone numbers anymore because we keep them all in the phones? Oh, God. What is her phone number? I hope my granddaughter's okay. 7346. Oh, my God. I can't remember. Here, thank you. Here's your phone back. I need to go charge my phone. Thank you. Guess what? We're already done. I've actually installed a Trojan onto that Android device. I can get the sysinfo, I can dump your call logs, I can dump your SMS, I can actually pop a shell, navigate through the phone as if it was a computer, and if you are using a bring your own device scenario and you're using corporate applications on your mobile device, depending on how those are configured, there's a strong possibility that I can ride those connections directly back into your enterprise. What about Flesh Hook. You got to love the names. As the guy who comes up with the attacks, I get to name them. So the last attack was pretty much only good for Androids due to the lockdown nature of the iOS architecture. But everybody familiar with the lawsuits that Apple has lost in Europe lately? You know, if you haven't been paying attention, the lightning cable, they can't use that anymore. And one of the other things that came out of that lawsuit was the NFC chip on Apple devices was locked down and proprietary and only allowed access and reads from within an application. Android has native NFC read. Well, all of my Apple iOS people out there, congratulations. As part of that lawsuit, you now have native reads for NFC directly from your iPhone as well, and you are just as vulnerable to this attack as the Androids. So, anybody here familiar with a tool not you, I know you are. Anybody here familiar with an old tool called Beef? All right, I got a couple of people. Everybody here, I'm sure, has heard those urban legends before of you got to be really careful. You got to be really careful. Especially when you're surfing the internet. There are websites that the bad guys are in your computers the minute you get on a web page. That's all just hooey, right? Wrong. It exists. It is called Beef. And this is one of the older tools that is out there. I don't even remember. Beef has been around at least 10, 15 years. But it stands for the Browser Extension Exploit Framework. It utilizes Java to hook browsers the minute the page reads in, and it provides an entire tool set and framework in order to work from, almost like Metasploit. And as a presenter, I love Beef because it gives me a GUI. It displays really, really well. So it takes less than 5 seconds to bring up a complete solution. And once again, all I have to do is convince one of you to put your phone in my hands. Whether that, we're at a conference. Hey, give me your phone. Let me punch in my name into LinkedIn so we can connect. Whatever it takes. Because this one, all I have to do is actually get close enough to trigger an NFC tag to actually open the infected website. Because I deal with a lot of technological people, a lot of security professionals, I decided to basically rip the Putty website down, pull out all of its protections, and then basically use that as my counterfeit. Right off the jump, you'll see that we have a new connection. And if I start looking around, I have modules. I can do on-device spear phishing. I can do geolocations. I can get persistence. I can turn on the camera. I can turn on the microphone. And let me tell you, as a father of 5 daughters, this is terrifying. You can see right here in the results of the GPS scan that it gave me everything right down to the exact latitude and longitude of where that device was when that request was made. I can figure out whether your connection type is cellular, Wi-Fi, IP scans, DNS enumeration, you name it. And all I have to do is just get that page to come up. So those are the 3 attacks that I debuted 3 years ago. And yeah, they were enough to get people to kind of take a little bit of notice, but I don't think that the time was right in the entire environment. And by that I mean the world in general. People weren't talking about integrating technology into humanity. And a lot of it, the push has come from the brain-computer interfaces. So what happens when I start doubling up and basically making complete attack chains out of implants? So before I get into the details, this is an implant-based man-in-the-middle attack. It does require one additional piece of equipment. I'm using a Raspberry Pi Zero W with a battery pack that I can basically stick in my pocket, running Ubuntu 24.04. And the reason I went with Ubuntu 24 is one of the add-on features is the ability to very easily create a Wi-Fi hotspot. Well, that gives me a hotspot, but what am I going to do with it? I'm going to stick a transparent proxy behind it. That's what I'm going to do with it. And I'm going to use the first implant to actually download the certificate for the proxy. The second is an NFC tag that will actually connect your mobile device to my Wi-Fi hotspot. So very simply, we start off, we've got our Raspberry Pi. I go up into the networking. This is actually going to be connected to my cell phone for the outbound connection. We just turned it on. I'm going to call it Rogue AP. So now I actually have something listening. Now this attack becomes very, very interesting. So the first thing I got to do is turn on the proxy server, and then I have to get the certificate onto the device. So we're going to start off the man in the middle. This is going to take care, I've got a script that's going to do this for me, sets up all of my IP tables, forwarding. And now we have our proxy terminal. So now it's a matter of getting the phone not once, but potentially twice. I load all of my chips directly from my cell phone, and that's what I'm showing here. I actually have a lot of the attacks already predefined in terms of what the NFC needs to be, and I can just basically grab my phone, write the chip, and we get to go. And it's this easy. Just approach, write completed. We're done. I'm ready to attack. I like to give you guys both sides of the scope so you can see what it looks like. In trying to deal with technical stuff that's involving your human body makes making videos really complicated. So the first thing I'm going to do is basically trigger a download to the certificate. Now, Android was nice, and this can be done on iPhone. We do have the procedure, but I'm not going to be demonstrating that. It won't let you install directly from the download location, but if you actually just navigate to the settings, it lets you install it with no problem. So Android needs a little bit more security around the ability to install certificates, if you ask me. So we're done with the first part. Once that certificate is on your mobile device, I can perform the second part of the attack anytime I want. So if it's a quick thing, maybe I load the cert and I decide I'm actually going to compromise you at a later date. The next time we get together, everybody here is very security conscious, so I know all of us shut our Wi-Fi off when we leave the house, right? It doesn't matter. You know, that's the one part about this that I was trying to point out. It doesn't matter. Part of the NFC trigger routine for connecting to a Wi-Fi network is to first turn on the Wi-Fi. So even if you're security conscious, I can still get around it. It's already pre-populated with everything it needs to be able to connect to that specific SSID. And at that point, once that connection is made, all I have to do is sit and wait. And as long as you're within range of my Wi-Fi hotspot, all of the background processes of your mobile device, anything that you pick up and actually decide to surf to, I'm going to get in clear text. So that in and of itself, I think, is pretty frightening. So next attack I want to show, we're at a security conference here, so let me ask the audience, what is the most difficult thing for an adversary to do if he's trying to do any type of phishing, smishing, or vishing attack? Anybody? What's the hardest part? What was that? Yeah, getting them to click the link. Convincing them that what they're seeing is legit. So what would happen if I made that initial phish real? I know, I'm getting the puzzled looks. And this is why I do what I do. One of the NFC triggers that are available is to pre-populate an SMS message or an email. And what happens when I trigger that on your device? It's going to use the default messaging utility, and it's going to try and use the default email carrier. So this is not a direct spearfish. This is an indirect spearfish. So we all know that this gentleman right up here in the front. Anybody that doesn't, stand up for a second if you would, please. I'm gonna I need 2 volunteers, so we're going to use him as one. And if I can get you to stand up for just a second, sir. All right, which one of you wants to be the victim, and which one of you guys wants to be the patsy?
Oh, I love being the victim.
Okay, he claimed victim. I hate to do this to you, but you got to be the patsy. We have Gerald, and Brad. If you don't know Brad, he is one of the stars around MITRE and an absolutely awesome speaker. I hope if you didn't miss his talk yesterday, make sure you watch it in the replay. So if Brad is my actual victim, how do I get Brad to click on something that I want him to? I get him to send it. So I pre-populate an SMS message with a link to maybe a beef site. Maybe it's going to some place that's going to have malware. Hey, Gerald, it's a pleasure to meet you. Let me put my contact information in your phone. It's going to send him a legitimate message from his email or his text. Thank you. Appreciate the help, guys. But the point is, it's not a fake. It's real. It's coming from a real, trusted individual. What would make Brad not think that that was safe to actually open? So let me show you what that looks like. Once again, I'm showing you that I have these already saved on my phone. So at any time, I can have these prepped and ready to go in less than 30 seconds. So I'm going to actually use the phishing. I have a predetermined target. In this case, it's one of my coworkers, Mr. Vishal Patel. And the subject is customer issue, and I've included a link. Program the chip, and then I go after somebody that knows Vishal. Whether that's somebody within the same organization, whether that's a personal friend, it doesn't matter. It just has to be somebody that Vishal would believe enough to actually click on that link. And let me show you what this looks like on the other end. So I go after Gerald. This is what it looks like. Just swap out Vishal for Brad. Customer issue, we need you to get it. We need to see if we can get there. Give you an email. This is what the email looks like on the other side. Is there anything in that email that would lead you to believe that this didn't come from someone that you believe, someone that you trust? There isn't. The only hope you have in this particular attack is if this is an email, you better hope that you have email forward lookups for, vulnerable links or, some type of advanced technology, or else there's nothing that's going to stop this from actually executing. So now we get to the talk about the mitigations. If I was to ask anyone in this room right now, and if anybody wants to answer this, we can do this. But if I asked any one of you in here to either can I look in your wallet or your purse? Anybody going to let me do that? Anybody want to give me free access into your wallets and purses? No? Then why in God's green earth would you ever hand your phone to someone? The amount of personally identifiable information in your mobile device is thousands of times what is in your wallet or your purse, and we treat them as if they're toys. Just because you can play a video game on it doesn't mean that it's not containing information that can do you harm. So before we start talking about mitigations, we have to talk about a few other outlying circumstances. First and foremost is bring your own device. We have integrated our corporate lives into our personal lives to the point where there is no line anymore in a lot of cases. I'm paying my bills on the same device that I'm checking my company email with. I'm playing, what was that? Candy Crush. That's what it was. I'm playing Candy Crush on the same device that has VPN access into my corporate networks. And society is trying to make a lot of use out of this specific technology. And if you don't know that symbol, that's the symbol for near field communication, or NFC. You know what else is tied to that? Apple Pay, Android Pay, all of those conveniences that everybody's wanting us to use are tied to technologies that have the ability to do beyond just paying. Is there anyone in this room that is not familiar with step-up authentication? Does everybody agree that step-up authentication is something that should be there for critical processes? Yes? Why aren't we doing the same thing with our mobile devices? I'm not telling you that you can't use Apple Pay. I'm just telling you to turn the NFC off until it's time to use it, turn it on, make your transaction, turn it back off. So let's talk about mitigations. We're going to start with physical security. How do you stop the physical threat of somebody like me? Remove single-factor authentication. We have MFA in front of everything. You know, some cases, it's a requirement as far as bare minimum to be able to even gain cyber insurance. But we don't take those same considerations against physical security. I used to work for a human resources and payroll company. I know that's freaking hilarious once you get to know me. It was a 3-letter company, started with A and ends in P, but I'm not going to say who they are. And just to get into the building where we were working, it was a scan, a PIN, minimum 2-factor, just to get in the front door. You know, I'm not going to tell you how many controls they had to get into the data center, but I'm talking just the front door was a minimum of 2. And how many people here, I would definitely not recommend you raising your hand to this, have nothing but a badge and you can walk right into your data center? If you wouldn't do it in digital, don't do it in physical. Digital security. Y'all ain't gonna like this. Mobile device management, where possible. From an enterprise perspective, if you're dealing in bring your own device, get the right MDM policies in place. What policies, Len? For starters, close all web browsers at the end of a session. That will stop the beef attack if you can get that. If you can get that page to close before I get persistence, the minute you close that page, that Java connection is severed. So for starters, don't allow pages to just sit in memory. Additionally, in terms of MDM, if you can set up a policy to turn off NFC, I would recommend it. And here comes the one that everybody hates, behavioral modification. Respect the data on your mobile devices. Disabling vulnerable protocols. Have a strong identity security posture. By that I mean, don't just be willy-nilly with your devices. I've said for a long time, don't give anyone your device. Well, Len, what happens if somebody needs to make an emergency phone call? Well, this scenario actually happened to me 2 weeks ago. I was sitting at the Austin Bergstrom Airport coming back from one of my tours, and this lady pulled up and she was like, can I use your phone? I need to find my daughter. And it was like, no, you cannot. But if you'd like, I'll dial the phone for you and I'll put it on speaker. You can still be friendly and maintain your own security. And finally, look to adopting the concepts of zero trust into your physical life. There is, I'm going to close with this particular thought. Identity is not just about digital. The idea of our digital identities and our physical identities have gotten to the point where they are so intertwined that there is no way to separate digital from physical and vice versa. And if you think I'm wrong, if I steal your credit card online, can I affect you in the physical world? We have biometrics. If I can compromise your biometric template in the physical world, I can affect you in the digital world. We need to stop looking at identity as something that's different. Identity is our entire identity and everything that composes it. Digital accounts, physical characteristics, behaviors, all of it. So continue to question everything and do what you can to stay as safe and responsible as possible, because there are people out here like me. So we've got a few minutes for Q&A. Anybody? Oh, you want to see my phone? I'll make you a deal. I'll trade you. Anybody else? Okay, hang on. We're coming over with a question. Interface. Okay, this was a very good question. For those of you that didn't hear it, what is the range in terms of my attack capabilities? Depending on the chip, I can be anywhere between 2.5 to 3 inches away from the device. And that's with the large one in the top of my hand. Now, the device that I'm planning on putting into my leg, the full computer, that actually has an antenna built into it, so the range could be up to multiple feet, up to meters. We got some in the back. You got an extra mic back there? I don't feel like doing stairs.
Yeah, hang on just a sec.
So have you considered a Yagi antenna in your forearms yet so you can just point at your target?
Actually, it wasn't a Yagi and it wasn't the forearm. The SBC that I was thinking about putting in, I was actually planning on putting it in my leg right behind the front pants pocket. And I've actually been discussing with my body mechanic the feasibility of actually making an incision all the way down my leg to just above my ankle and running a full copper wire antenna from the hip to the actual ankle. It's not a Yagi, but it would definitely give me the range. So yeah, the only thing we're concerned about with that is the bending of the knee, potentially work hardening the antenna, and eventually snapping. But it is something I'm actually already looking into. Next.
So, question, are all of your chips like passive chips, or do you have any that are powered, and any plans on how you're going to manage that?
Absolutely. Currently, all of the chips that I have in me right now are all basically purchased off the shelf. And the name of the magic website for all of you to come follow me on this journey beyond humanity is called dangerousthings.com. They're based in Seattle, Washington, and this is where every implant that I have up to this point has come from. Therein lies the statement. Any consumer-grade implantable technology has no internal power. The only thing that has power is medical grade. So, to counteract that, I'm actually working on a new project. And is everyone here familiar with dermal piercings? You know, essentially these are like a flat back that you make a small incision, you put the piercing in, and then the skin grows back up around it. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be using a couple of dermal piercings and attaching wires to the back of them and actually turning them into almost like a maglock charger for the SBC inside my arm. I'm using the continuous glucose monitors. I have my brother is type 2 diabetic, so I basically took one of those CGMs, gutted it out, basically filled it with a battery so that I can actually have something that I can put on my arm that would not be considered suspicious. And actually, that is what's going to power the internal SBC. So yeah, I've thought about it. You know, as we continue to move forward, there's also some amazing technologies around blood glucose power cells, the ability to power through radio transmission. I mean, the options are endless.
So have you thought about actually designing, you know, from a circuitry standpoint, some of these things yourself? Okay, very cool.
Yeah. The question was, am I going with off-the-shelf stuff or if I'm developing my own? I'm actually working with a KiCad designer right now. I've been calling it a Raspberry Pi Zero just because we don't know what else to call it yet. But it's going to be a specific SBC with dual Wi-Fi, dual Bluetooth, the ability to do a lot of the offensive-style security attacks that would normally not be able to be done with a Raspberry Pi without some type of third-party accessory.
Hey, Len, we have Naomi up here in the back with a question.
Shoot.
How are they charged now?
Okay, so currently they don't get charged. There's no batteries on them. Have you ever seen somebody take like a card and they go up to like a locked door and there's like a little square box next to the door and they hold the badge up to the box and then the door opens? This is called inductive power. So that little box has an energy field that's coming out around it. And everybody, this is a younger person, so that's why I'm trying to explain it. So that energy field, when it comes into contact, when my chip gets inside that field, it powers up and it transfers information back and forth. So right now, there's no batteries, there's no power until I get close to a source that can give it power. The next implant is going to have a battery that's going to be plugged in on the outside of my body, and then it's going to use wires to actually go from my arm or my leg down into the device and actually give it power that way. How am I looking on time for Q&A?
You got 5 more minutes if we have any other questions.
Oh, we got more.
Hey, Len, are there any health risks associated with the implants, or are they all pretty safe?
Anytime you're doing anything like this, there's always the risk. One thing that people find pretty interesting to know is all of the implants that I have, there has been no anesthetic used for any of them. You cannot get anesthesia without someone having a minimum of a nurse's license. And realistically, I don't like doctors, I don't trust them. And how would you actually even make that phone call to set up that appointment? Hello, Dr. So-and-so, I bought this stuff on the internet and I'd like you to cut me open and put, hello? Hello? I don't use doctors. Most people in this particular subculture, we use body mechanics or body modification parlors. So the same people that would split your tongue or gauge your ears are the ones that are actually doing the implants. Personal health issues, I had one issue, and that was when I had the large implant in the top of my hand done. My mechanic warned me ahead of time, you need to get on some anti-inflammatories just before the surgery. Same thing you would get from any doctor. I'm from Detroit, I don't need to do that. The day after I had the procedure done, I woke up with a quarter of a softball sticking out of the top of my hand, just from the swelling and the fluids. Beyond that, no, I've had no health issues whatsoever.
I have one question. With all those implants that you have, does that affect you going through the airport scanners?
None. There is most of the material that are used to make up these implants is silicone. It's not metal. So therefore, it will not react to a magnetometer. And these things in the airport, the LiDAR scanners, those are not x-rays. Those are density scanners. So they're looking for anything between your body and the outside of your clothing. They cannot actually see inside the body. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to leave you guys with one last thought.
We got one more. Hang on.
Okay, one more, then the closing thought.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I was at a recent GRC conference in Austin. You may have been there, where the guest speaker was talking. It was a futurist, and he spoke of a 40-year window of when singularity might be anticipated.
You're talking about the 2045 project.
Right.
Real quick, that isn't, I know, I don't mean to interrupt you. I said 2045, not 2025.
Yeah. It's in the near term, yeah.
So
the idea is, the question is, how does this lay kind of a glide slope into that reality?
What I'm doing, I really don't think does. I think what I'm doing is opening up the scope of what's possible. When it comes, as I was just saying, the 2045 project, and I'd advise anybody to go check this out, essentially is stating that the human being will be able to download their digital consciousness to some type of media by the year 2045. Now, there's a couple of points that I want to make on that, and I got to do this quick. First and foremost, if you remember what I was saying in terms of the body dysmorphia example, being able to download your consciousness, first and foremost, would require, at a minimum, some type of brain-computer interface that can actually interface with the neurons and gain access to our memories. We haven't got that far. Honestly, right now, the only thing we have as far as BCI is up, down, left, right, and click. That's all the functionality there is. So first and foremost, we would need to make massive advances within the technology itself. Secondly, we would need to move the lines of what is considered socially and morally acceptable. Because right now, the only people that would gain access to these particular types of technology would be the most damaged among us. people who are shut-ins, Parkinson's. Joe Average, me and you, are not going to be able to gain access to these under the current medical system because they're meant for people with deficiencies. So you can actually very clearly see the differences between the two philosophies of transhumanism. But we are going to first need to move that line of what is considered medical and what is considered ethical. I do think that we're going to eventually get to the point where we can do these kinds of things, but I think we're a little bit off the mark for 2045. So, in closing, we are already living in a future world. We just don't know it yet. And you can't protect against an attack if you don't know the attack even exists. So, in closing, I was going to say I would like to thank HUSECCon. As soon as I get done here, I'm going over to the village. They've been gracious enough to actually do a book signing for me. So if you'd like to get an autograph and a copy of my book, I'll warn you guys ahead of time, the book ain't here yet. The book doesn't actually get released until the 29th of next month, but we do have signature cards, and you will get a copy of the book the minute it comes out, and you won't have to pay for it. So with that, one last time, my name is Len Noe, and I approve this message, and I thank you guys for your time. Oh, one last thing. As soon as I'm done with the book signing, DC 281 has been gracious enough to offer me one of their rooms over by track 6, where after I get done with the book signing, I'm going to go hang out. If you guys have any other questions or that you'd like answered, or you just want to shoot the shit with me for a little while, they've given me a room and an opportunity to be able to interface. So hats off to the DC guys and CCon. And I appreciate everyone's time. I'll see y'all soon.
Right on. Thank you, Lynn.